Welcome back to the Psychology of Black Womanhood podcast. I'm Dr. Dion Stevens, a psychology professor and the co-author of the Psychology of Black Womanhood book. Now, I know we've been gone for a month, but we were really busy hosting both our annual symposium and the Institute for the Psychology of Black Womanhood Scholars at Spelman College. You can find out more about these yearly events if you visit our website. But I'm glad you tuned in to today's really important episode. Eating disorders have long been portrayed as issues affecting mostly young white women. But research shows that Black women are engaging in these behaviors, often in different ways and with less recognition. In this episode, we're going to explore the prevalence of eating disorders among Black women, the cultural and structural factors that are shaping our experiences, and the urgent need for more inclusive approaches to treatment and recovery. We're really happy to be in conversation with Dr. Rachel W. Goode, the Wallace Kuralt Distinguished Early Career Scholar, Associate Professor at the School of Social Work, and an Adjunct Assistant Professor in the Center for Eating Disorder Excellence in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Her groundbreaking research on this topic centers our historical relationships with food and the importance of community for addressing our body's health. What drew you to focus your research on obesity and eating disorders, and specifically among Black women? Because as I said offline, there seems to be so much research about white women, but less when it comes to Black women or women of color broadly.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking this because a lot of it started out of my own personal journey, watching my family, just a legacy of seeing women in my family struggle with food and weight, and seeing how I, as a child, I remember being lonely, being bored, just feeling not enough. And food became a quick friend. Right. It was my friend. It was my go-to. And I noticed I was struggling with my weight. I personally had PCOS. And so there were so many things that were happening that I did not feel like there was enough out there to understand. Like I didn't understand. And I knew that it was deeper than, just eat differently. And so that led me to have some questions. And so then when I decided to go back to a PhD program, as I was understanding, I saw how little we were looking into eating disorders, right? And I said, well, that relationship with food, and I don't see that enough in our science. I don't see that represented enough in our literature. And so I was looking, I think, on a traditional pathway to understand obesity in Black women. But as I was on the path and thinking about what I saw in myself, what I saw in my community, I said, we're not talking enough about their relationship with food. We're not talking enough about it. And as I started digging, I realized that, oh my goodness, there is so much more here. And maybe we don't say it's an eating disorder. I think that was the first thing. The terminology is not culturally congruent. We don't talk like that, right? We don't talk like that. But I know, a lot of us still struggle nonetheless, right? Even if we don't have the words or the language that even we would identify it in our culture, it's here. And I wanted to make it visible to help provide a pathway so we could get free and go on with our lives.
So what are the major eating disorders that exist?
I think the one we know most about is anorexia nervosa. And so historically, when folks are struggling with anorexia nervosa, they have low body weight and then they have a fear of eating. And we see a lot of genetic links to that. Then there are some of the binge eating disorders, so there's bulimia nervosa and binge eating disorder. And what they both have in common is that those who engage will have binge eating episodes, meaning people cannot stop eating even though they would want to. And they might eat a large amount of food, like an objectively large amount of food. And then what's different, though, with bulimia nervosa is that people will have purging behaviors to get rid of the food. So, they might use laxatives or excessive exercise. Like they have different things that they do. Versus in binge eating disorder, they do not have those compensatory behaviors that they are doing to get rid of the food.
And then how does that differ from obesity?
So obesity, how our society defines obesity is having a BMI of over 30. And so it's exclusively about being in a larger body. However, we know a lot more about the limitations of BMI. It was never a measure that was created to define that. And then truly, just because you're in a larger body does not mean that your body is not handling it well. Right. And so often what we're learning is that in order to really define obesity, we might need to look at some of the other cardiovascular outcomes, like how's your blood pressure, how is your blood sugar, and look at some of these other things and see the presence of some other indicators that your body might not be handling your body weight well. But right now, we don't really have that. We've just diagnosed it based on your body size. And so people who have obesity may have an eating disorder or they may not. For example, about 30% of Black women with obesity have binge eating concerns, but that means the other 70% don't. And so we are continuing to learn more. We haven't understood really what obesity is. And again, we have racism in our history.
Right.
They don't want larger bodies.
Right.
Period. Anything that looks like us, no. We're different. We are different. And so we can carry more weight than, let's say, our white counterparts because we're made different. And so we're still, I think, learning about what for you is the size that your body is saying, hey, I that's too much for me. I cannot handle that. And helping people, because that's more of an individual thing than the way that we've handled that.
I love the fact that you brought up the need for language and naming it. What are the unique factors around naming it and even thinking about the diversity and umbrella terms that exist as it relates to Black women?
I think in order for us to understand what to call it, we need to understand what, not in every case, but in many cases with some of us, our relationship with food, the historical relationship with food, right? And so in the mainstream culture, they talk about eating disorders developing mostly out of the over-evaluation of shape or weight, wanting to be thin, pursuing thinness. And so, again, I'm not saying that's not happening with Black population, but what we're seeing, our eating behaviors are often something that we're using to cope with our negative emotions, or we're coping with the racism, how we're coping with the stress, right? We learned that historically, our mothers, our grandmothers, like they made mosaics out of nothing, right? That's what we had to give each other. And so we did not have therapists, right? We didn't have therapists, but we had our God and our food and how we would fellowship with each other. And that's what we learned to do. And so even the term eating disorder, okay, let's think about that, because that's not how we think about it.
Right.
It's not an eating disorder. We're happy. This is bringing me joy. This is helping me cope. This is helping me get through my day. What are you talking about eating disorder? So whenever I even approach the conversation, if I even start with eating disorder, that's immediately going over their heads, right? Because I don't have an eating disorder. However, I said, do you feel like sometimes you can't stop eating if you want to? Right? Do you feel like you lose control? Do you feel like you kind of run to food when you've had a bad day? You might be knee deep in a bag of chips after work, right? Do you see that happening? And so I find when I use that language, they're like, oh yeah, I do. I see that. And then I can use that as a pathway to start talking about it. So we don't have to, the name, if I just need you to know, we talking about the same thing, right? And to think about how to say it. Because, eating disorder is we're not clicking, right? Now, the younger adults, I feel like they have a little bit more language. So they're, I think, a little bit more comfortable with some of those terms, right? Especially if they've grown up in predominantly white environments. Right. They might connect to that term a little bit more. But for our older Black adults, it's like, what are you talking about?
I think that's really important that you brought up that there could be generational differences, socioeconomic status, regional. What are some of the differences that you're seeing, maybe just even from the statistics as it relates to Black women and these issues?
Sure. So when we look at, there's 3 major eating disorders. We have anorexia nervosa, and then bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder. And so with the ones that we see most common among Black adults would be binge eating disorder.
Mm.
And so that is probably that's the number one eating disorder in the nation. And that's probably the predominant eating disorder in Black populations. Anorexia nervosa, where people are kind of restricting their eating, have low body weight. We do not see that as much. However, I would say there is more, they call it atypical anorexia nervosa, where they're not experiencing low body weight, but they're still having a fear of eating. And so our science hasn't caught up to be able to properly document the statistics. But when I talk to my eating disorder clinicians who are treating Black populations, when they see young adults, they are seeing more and more of folks struggling with this atypical anorexia nervosa. Here's why it gets missed often in Black populations, because we might show up in a body where they assume, oh, you have no problem with this. They have obesity. We need to talk to them about type 2 diabetes or talk to them about losing weight, not even thinking that eating could be a challenge, right? We've been so conditioned that the body size is, we just got to get them out of that body size. And we are missing right in front of us. Our doctors are just being like, it doesn't matter how you lost the weight, you just got to get it off. And people are manifesting these eating disorders and they don't know.
What's the barriers for us acknowledging and getting to that point?
Yes. One of the barriers is eating disorders aren't really talked about in our community, right? We don't have a language for them. They're seen as a white girl problem. I remember joking with friends when I was younger because it was something that we obviously don't have. This is not our issue. So I think one is that we don't have recognition of it. And two, the doctor isn't trained to recognize the eating disorder. So they've said that we've done research with primary care physicians and they admit we get no training on eating disorders. And another thing is a lot of eating disorder training or therapy treatment is in specialty eating disorder clinics.
Right.
So a lot of therapists, when they go for their training, they don't always get trained on eating disorders. They don't always have the tools. And so we can't help what we don't know. And I think that's one of the major barriers. Others are cost, because again, you got to pay to go to these clinicians, and these clinicians are charging out of pocket price.
So what is an example of something that people can do with the little bit that we do know or have access to?
A lot of the tools for healing eating disorders or preventing eating disorders begin with regular eating to help. And so some of that, again, if we can control it, I know folks are navigating food insecurity. So that, on a systems level, that's something that we could do something about if we wanted to as a nation. But if you do have access to enough food to eat, it's eating regularly. Like, again, a lot of us skip meals. And so when you skip meals, our body eventually is like, okay, she ain't listening to me, so I'm going to stop talking to her. So people say, I'm not hungry. I'm getting hungry. And your body, that doesn't mean your body don't need food. And so some of us have gotten so used to not eating regularly that we don't. But you will eat it later. You will get it eventually. And so then you have the night eating. So people are eating and can't kind of control themselves at night. And that's because you did not eat enough during the day. And so helping people get some of those regular tools, like we got to eat regularly. You're worth it to stop whatever you're doing and eat.
Right.
And not keep going, because you will eat later. And that will increase your risk for chronic disease. And so if we can just start eating regularly, that will help a lot and prevent eating disorders. That will help a lot. And anytime you want to lose weight, don't ignore your body. Right? Your body is your friend. It's trying to help you. And so whatever you do, your body said it's hungry. Listen, and not ignore it. Yeah.
How does food insecurity play into all of these things?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. So we are learning. I'd say this research is real recent, within the last decade. When we think about food security in the United States, about 88% of the households are food secure. But there are 11% who have very low food security, meaning there are children in the home who do not have access to enough food. And what we see when children are hungry, we see a higher level of eating disorder pathology. And then among adults who are receiving like SNAP benefits or in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, we did a study where we talked to adults during COVID-19. And during COVID-19, adults got more SNAP benefits, but they all said the same thing. We run out at some point during the month. So we have about 3 weeks where we have enough. And then there's this 1 week where we do not have enough food. And we are going to, what do? You try to, you're going to skip some meals. You're going to make it work. But what we find is when the benefits come back, people are overdoing it. They're just like that restriction. Same thing. The body is like, I haven't had enough food to eat. And so they're going to overdo it and they're going to overeat and sometimes have binge eating episodes. So we see in the context of food insecurity, more food insecurity, higher eating disorder pathology, higher binge eating. And again, when you think about it makes sense. You understand because the pattern is the same. The reason is different. It's the same. The body's like, there's not enough. And so what we've also seen is when adults have a history of food insecurity as a child, that's a trauma.
Right.
And they do not ever, right? When you have been hungry, as you don't ever want to feel that again. And so I remember adults in my study being like, my refrigerator is always packed because I don't ever want to feel that hunger again.
Yeah.
And we, again, have enough research to understand that. But that is something that we're also seeing.
I'm so glad you explained this. There's this lack of awareness. So what are people supposed to look for when they're identifying if there's something going on?
For atypical anorexia, it's that fear of eating. So people often aren't eating enough. They might just be eating really small meals. It's like not enough to satisfy them, but they're either trying to make a calorie deficit or they're trying to cut out certain food groups. And they might do this again, often that pursuing a body size or a weight loss goal, they kind of get caught up. And here's the challenge is, because we don't have the language often in our culture around eating disorders, then we fall into traps unexpectedly. So I get on these Facebook groups and I see a lot of folks fall into these dieting traps. And what happens with dieting is it's almost like holding your breath. I can do it for a little bit, right? I got you for a little bit, but eventually you're going to have to let your breath out. You're going to have to let it out. And so what happens is that, again, us not knowing that, again, in the white population, they've talked a lot about dieting, right? They kind of hashed it out, but we haven't quite hashed that out yet. Yeah. So when people are trying to lose weight, they're going to do things that in your community, who in your community has lost weight? You're going to talk to sister who lost the weight. What did she do? Right. And if she did a diet, you're going to be likely probably to follow that same diet and then unintentionally set yourself up to develop an eating disorder because, again, the body is going to jump in. It's like you're not eating enough, and then it's going to pressure you to eat. And often when people get that pressure, they might develop a binge eating episode. And then what happens? Oh, man, I ate too much. I feel bad. I got to restrict again. It's me, right? That's the hard part. They think I'm the bad person. I didn't have enough control. If I had enough control, not realizing that the body said, girl, what are you doing? I'm trying to keep you alive. So I'm going to step in and I'm going to interrupt your process. Right. And you're going to just keep going around. And we go round and around in a circle. And so folks go from restriction to binge eating. And they keep going back and forth. And so we see that, again, the number one eating disorder that we're seeing with our folks is the binge eating. We have some studies with adults that had type 2 diabetes. Mm-hmm. And again, type 2 diabetes, if anyone has navigated that, one of the first things you're told is you can't eat the stuff you used to eat. Oh, yeah. Right? You cannot eat what you used to eat. And so restriction. And so, the human, you going to get that food eventually, right? You going to find it. Right. And we see binge eating develop. So we're learning just how it's manifesting in our folks and what we can do to help them. It's interesting that there's this psychological piece, but there's also this physiological piece too, like you brought in the diabetes. So how does binge eating then link to things like diabetes or obesity related things, which I think we talk about more in the Black community? Mm-hmm. So usually when people are trying to lose weight, they have this thought, right? I gotta lose some weight. I gotta get some weight off of me. And so the first thing, because in our culture, the first thing you think to do is get on a diet. Right. And when you get on that diet, the diet's going to tell you, okay, sis, if you eat this, you're going to lose this weight. And you're like, I got it. I can do this. I can get on the cabbage fruit diet. I can only eat meat. What happens is then that restriction, and then the body gets concerned because you're not eating enough. And then it's going to send you pressure to eat. You're going to probably overeat, eat more than you would like.
Right.
Then you're going to feel guilty. And then you're going to get right back in the cycle all over again. And so often when people are struggling with obesity, they have tried to diet for a long time. Right, because their doctor, they're feeling the pressure. I got to get this weight off. I got to get this weight off. So they try a different diet. So they go from diet to diet to diet, which might set them up from then having more binge eating episodes. And increasing binge eating because you might be eating a lot of food. You might, lots of food, and that can lead to increasing weight. And then if you're continuing to do that for years, that could lead to type 2 diabetes.
Right.
So right now we have a study funded by the American Diabetes Association where we're trying to connect with Black young women, 18 to 25, because before they start getting in the cycle that their mothers, the grandmothers got in, we want to catch them because likely 18 to 25, they're thinking, oh, I may not like my body, or I want to get in a different size body, or they might be emotional eaters. Once you get on that track, it's real hard to get off because you've been doing this stuff for years. So if we can help people learn to make peace, that's a lot of my science. How do I live in my body long term? Recognizing I'm going to change sizes. Our bodies have different needs and different seasons, but how do I have a long-term strategy for eating outside of wanting to lose weight? Because in our culture, we don't really do long-term, like just life. Like, how do I eat for life versus I'm trying to get thin? Like, it's just either or. And if I'm not trying to get thin, then I'm just eating whatever.
How are things like Ozempic and all these new products impacting? Listeners can see your face right there. How is that impacting the work that you're doing right now? Because as you're talking about this, I'm sitting here thinking about how that's so much coming up in all these discussions about bodies. How are things like that impacting your work?
Yeah, so people are getting on this medication and they're seeing weight loss.
Yeah.
You know how happy, if you have been a person who struggled with your weight for years and you finally have a tool to lose weight.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, the joy that people feel is probably just palpable. They are so excited. It's like the heavens have opened up. They might be experiencing just this fresh newness. However, eventually insurance will stop paying for it.
Right.
Or they will not be able to afford to shell out hundreds of dollars per month, right? Unless you got Oprah money.
Right.
So eventually people are going to have to get off the medication. And what we see when they get off, they are gaining the weight back. Right. And could you imagine? One, anxiety provoking, heartbreaking. I got to do whatever I need to do to not gain this weight back. So you can imagine what naturally is happening.
Right.
People are struggling with restriction and eating disorders are developing. Another thing is that sometimes the medication, it almost works too well and people are losing too much weight.
Right.
And then they don't want to, again, because our culture, thinner the better. They don't want to eat enough because the medication can affect your hunger signals, right? Your ability, may not get hungry for hours. Eating just a little bit of food, you may not get hungry. And so it's kind of throwing you off. And so when people get off, they call it the Hunger Games when it comes back. Like it rages back. Yeah. And then people are overwhelmed, right? Because they haven't had to deal, they don't have the tools. They never had the tools to begin with. Often when people are on the medication, they're not doing anything like a lifestyle therapy adjunct to it. So they're just taking a pill and eating whatever they were eating before. And if they're eating, they were eating, having Mountain Dew cookies, they're still eating Mountain Dew and cookies. Right. And so that has never got addressed. So you can just imagine it's a storm. If we really wanted to help people, we would keep them on it. If you want to start it, they got to stay on it for life.
Right.
And we would support them to stay on it for life. We would make it cost effective for them to stay on it for life, but we are not doing that. And so we are causing, it's almost like they just got on a diet. They had a diet pill. And when they're going to stop taking the diet pill and they're going to struggle, it's going to be hard. So it makes me scared because I don't know if we've seen the other side, and we're going to.
You're both a scientific researcher. You got a K award, but by the way, people should know a K award is like the top of the top in the country for getting an award. But on top of this, you do clinical work and work in the communities. And so I think that's really important because a lot of times as a scholar, as a faculty member, researcher too, we're just kept in academia and we do this research, but we don't connect it to what's happening really out there. And so being in the ivory tower and then being in the community, what are you seeing as the missing link that would be really helpful for addressing what Black women need?
I think when we understand the function of our eating, right? Eating I feel like it often masks history of dis-ease in our bodies, in our life, how we are living, how we are supported, right? All we got on our shoulders, trauma that has been unspoken.
Right.
That's what our eating is really doing. So when we then jump in and say, you just need to, lose this weight and eat better, we are missing the root of it. And often what I'm seeing is that, again, historically, emotions were a liability for Black folks. We could not be talking about, I feel like such and such. Come on, you'd be killed. Like, you can't do that. Right. So we don't know quite how to process our emotions. Like, it's not something that we're passing down from generation to generation. So likely a lot of us have grown up in it's an emotionally invalidating environment, meaning I'll give you something to cry about. What you crying for? What you crying for? Like, get over that. You ain't got time to be crying. So you learn quickly, I cannot show this emotion. Right. I cannot show this emotion. I have to figure out another way to deal with it. And we figure out another way to deal with it. And so that's really what we're seeing is the historical manifestation of the legacy of trauma that our people have carried for years and years and years. And we just haven't usually we didn't have the money to buy the food where we could cope. But now we got cheap food. Well, it's not as cheap as it used to be, but you can still find, highly palatable food that's meant to keep you addicted. You can buy it for a couple dollars. You can eat as much as you want. You go to the store, buy you a whole cake. Nobody has to cook nothing, right? You just buy it off the shelf. Like, we're in that environment. So we have a legacy of coping with food. We didn't have it enough before, but now it's food everywhere, all around us. So that combined is what we're seeing. And I think if we see that piece, we will focus far more on healing, rather than, girl, you gotta lose this weight. It hurts my heart, right? I know it's real, right? We are trying to not be sick, not have type 2 diabetes, not have obesity, not have chronic disease, take our life early. And that is a starting point, but deeper. And I hope we will continue to develop the tools so that we can also do the deeper work so that you get healed, right? Healed from the inside out, and that you are able to go on with your life and not need to depend on that food in the same way.
But you're doing this work. You have interventions. So what's going on with the work that you're doing?
Yes. So we're excited. For the last couple of years, we have been helping Black women relearn their signals of hunger and fullness. Now, when I say that, you're like, hey, we all know how to eat, but we look at American culture, child, we are so funny. Right? We eat because it's time. We eat because they offer us food. We eat because we're emotional. Or we skip meals because we are working 12-hour shifts and we don't have time to eat. So we're all kind of all over the place when it comes to eating. People would say, oh, you don't want to spoil your appetite. And I truly did not understand what they were saying because I could always eat something. I didn't know what that meant. I was like, we're talking about spoil your appetite. No. I could always eat. And I feel like many people agree with me. We can always eat something. So let's start at the beginning. Let's go back to the basics. And what I have found in our studies, this started as my dissertation work. I had a group of women, 8 weeks. We met together weekly. Now, one thing Black folks love is community.
Yeah.
Black women love community. So we met weekly. We had a community of women. We were supporting each other and we were working on this hunger and fullness every week. And by the time we got out, they knew, they understood, because it takes time to learn it,
Yep.
right? But we would come back every week, talk about what was hard, what did you struggle with, how, and we did practice again, right? And every week we noticed as we practiced, as we worked on it, it was transforming. Things were coming up like, oh, I might need therapy for such and such. Like, this happened to me. I'm recognizing that. I'm turning to food for this. That's the goal, right? We're starting to bring some of those things out where people can see, I need some additional support. I need some additional healing. And so we've seen in our science how when we do that, again, Black women led team, they saw us represented everywhere and they were with each other. They were supported, they were loved on, and we saw how that helped with their eating and reduced their binge eating, reduced their emotional eating. We did it with a larger sample. We built a digital tool where we, again, had videos where we were walking through the basics, and then they got a Fitbit, they were walking, they were tracking, and then they were let's just increase your physical activity. Take a walk, sis. Just take a walk around the block and reduce your binge eating, your emotional eating, using those same tools. And what we saw is that when we added the exercise, we were able to prevent weight gain. So folks were maintaining their weight. If you can maintain and be in a good place, again, and have the tools that you can be in your body and know what you really need, child, that'll change your life, right? That prevents chronic disease, right? So in our research now, we're working with Black adults with type 2 diabetes, trying to understand, again, how to apply some of these same principles as they are navigating binge eating in their, type 2 diabetes context.
Right.
And then we're thinking about, like, what does it need to look like? And how do we prevent type 2 diabetes with our young adult women? Like, what do we need to do to help them not get on the same track?
Right.
So we're excited about what we've been learning and just looking forward to continuing to show up for our people and make a difference in our science.
So as we were talking offline, I said there are so few Black women doing this work in spaces where this is being created. You're in North Carolina, so maybe someone who's up by you could connect. But what could an individual who's not near you do to try and gain this, or even build community or access tools? What kind of guidance would you give them?
Yeah, so I feel like in this season, community is not optional. Right? In some seasons, it's been good, right? But this is not a good season. This is hard season. In my therapy practice, what I notice is I see so many folks who sometimes I'm like, now we're talking, but you really need a sister friend. And we see how the traditional boundaries of community have broken down. And people don't have sister friends or friends, older mentors who could come and walk them through some of the things that they're going through. And so that's one of the things that I feel like I always encourage people to do is, what do you need to do to find a community? Whether you are engaging in a fun group at a local community center or you're active in your church, like, what are you doing to build community? Because that's going to help you feel some more supported. And sometimes what I'm seeing with eating is that people are lonely. They're bored. They're not enjoying life. And food it surprises me how little sometimes we enjoy our life. And the food hides it, right? Because I enjoy the food. So I will get so excited about what I'm going to eat, when I'm going to eat it. But that's the joy I get of the day.
Right.
And thinking about, how can I build a life where I'm finding joy outside of eating? Like, there's more, and so some of our interventions, we work with adults on building more positive, pleasurable activities into your day. It's simple, but not easy, because a lot of us don't have a life that's built around making sure we are experiencing joy,
Right.
and what that looks like. And we deserve to experience joy, and to start to build that in our communities and in our personal lives, and then to recognize one thing I have loved is that people are more comfortable with seeking out therapy, with seeking out support for their mental health, and to know you are just delaying your healing. Go, and there's so many cost-effective options these days. People they have a range of options. Sometimes through your employer, you get free sessions, that you might be able to take advantage of. That I would encourage folks just to go and take advantage of opportunities to do that work. And then to start to listen again to your body, make friends with your body. It's not an enemy. We have learned to treat it as an enemy. It wants to help you. It knows more than you think about what you need. And it takes practice to learn to listen to it again. And it's worth it. Because when you learn to listen, then it can talk to you instead of yelling at you, right? It's
right, absolutely.
It's like, girl, you're tired, you're stressed. Like, can we do something about this before I have to sit you down and you got to be on medication? Like, can we work on this and start to, take a walk, like for your mental health, even if just for your mental health, just take a walk. It will help you.
You are just listening to Dr. Rachel W. Goode, the Wallace Kuralt Distinguished Early Career Scholar and an Adjunct Assistant Professor in the Center for Eating Disorder Excellence at UNC Chapel Hill. To explore more of Dr. Goode's work, including her research articles, community initiatives, and social media connections, you just have to visit this episode's page on the Psychology of Black Womanhood website. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Psychology of Black Womanhood podcast. As usual, we've got some great guests lined up for the upcoming shows, so be sure to check out our episode topics by visiting our website. If you enjoyed this episode and want to support the podcast, just follow us and leave a rating or review. To stay up to date on our upcoming episodes and all the latest news and the related activities, like our annual symposium and institute at Spelman College, just follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Thanks again for joining us, and be sure to tune in for our next episode in 2 weeks when we'll be centering even more research on Black women's lives in the real world.